people want to know what's going on. And of course, with hip-hop and the essence of hip-hop, the art form, it's always been a person able to speak from the streets and give their perspective of what's going on in the city.
What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the second episode of Hip Hop Is. What you just heard was an excerpt of Larry Laro Wilson, CEO of Lawless Inc. in World Star Hip Hop's 2014 Chirac documentary. The purpose was to set up the scene for what we'll be talking about today. So, as I said, welcome back to Hip Hop Is. I'm your host, Andrea Baldrius. For those of you just tuning in, I am a fourth-year sociology major at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Hip Hop Is aims to explore hip-hop culture in a way that is widely accessible to a range of audiences. So today, we'll be talking about one of hip-hop's most notorious subgenres, drill music. You may be thinking, what is drill music? I took to the streets, aka Urban Dictionary, and I found a definition by D-Man644, which says, quote, drill music is a subgenre of hip-hop's trap music, originating in Chicago's impoverished South and West Sides. Whereas traditional trap lyrics from Atlanta more so concern drug dealing or, quote, trapping, drill music's lyrics are more violent and aggressive, reflecting the violent nature of some of Chicago's neighborhoods that made it the murder capital of America in 2012. Drill music was nationally popularized in early 2012 by the likes of Chief Keef, King Louie, and Lil Durk, among others. End quote. Alright, that gave us a lot to unpack, so thank you, D-Man644. Now, let's back up a little. So, how do the styles of traditional hip-hop as opposed to drill music compare? Drill music is usually dark synths. The lyrics are often chant-based, survival-driven, hyper-violent, and the production itself is sonically clustered or overwhelming. I'll give you an example. I want to let you all know how I was feeling about drill music when I first heard it. I heard drill music and I was like, nah, not for me. Why are they yelling at me? I don't like this. I came back to this and I was like, okay, I'm just going to dive into it and kind of learn about why this rap music came to be. According to the Chicago Housing Association website, Chicago's plan for transformation began in 2000. The website states that it was the, quote, largest, most ambitious redevelopment effort of public housing in the United States, with the goal of rehabilitating or redeveloping the entire stock of public housing in Chicago, end quote. Now, this only aimed to benefit leaseholders and stakeholders, which ultimately meant that the huge changes that were coming for the residents of Chicago would not be in their interest. It was an intense conversion that no one anticipated the results of. The plan resulted in a lack of affordable housing, which led to the displacement of Chicago residents to either non-subsidized housing that landlords didn't care for, or the streets. Now, this is an all too familiar narrative for those of us who are native to Santa Cruz or who live in California or the US. This lack of affordable housing stripped and barred folks from their livelihood. There was no access to resources. They lived in food deserts, no proper education. They were left to their own devices. Now, as the opening quote implied, whatever is happening in hip-hop is happening with those who are producing the content, right? So this begs the question, what sort of sociological significance could this subgenre possibly have? Shouldn't I just dismiss it as merely pathological to South and West Chicago inner-city youth? To help answer these questions, I brought in Dr. Charity Clay, who is a critical race sociologist. She received her PhD in sociology from Texas A&M. Dr. Clay is currently a professor in sociology at Merritt College in Oakland. However, she's not only a professor and sociologist, but an amazing lyricist and hip-hop artist. Dr. Charity and I met a couple months back at a Black Minds Matter event here at UCSC. During this event, a student asked her about the state of hip-hop in regards to artists like Future, Migos, and other rappers currently in the mainstream, and she responded that the state of hip-hop was perfectly fine. And what I loved most about her point was that it was important to understand that these rappers are operating within their specific context, and we must be cognizant that there's always more to us than media would like to show. So from my own experience, drill music has received a lot of flack from hip-hop heads who disregard its cultural significance and validity as a subgenre of hip-hop, myself included. However, I, seemingly like her, believe in looking not only at individuals, but systems and socio-environmental and historical conditions that stem from them. So I brought Dr. Charity Clay in to ask her what she feels the social significance of drill music is, and what is its use as a cultural informant. We are going to take a quick break now that y'all have a hopefully semi-firm understanding of what drill music is, how to identify it, and a small component of the historical conditions that allowed for drill music to come into fruition. So after the break, we are going to hear from Dr. Charity Clay, and she's going to give us a extensive rundown on why we should reconsider the sort of value that we attribute to this subgenre. She'll tie in some hip-hop history, some drill history, and beautifully connect it to sociological perspective. She even connects it to our contemporary moment and our broader national conversation on gun control, and how, the sort of violence that is reflected in drill music is reflected, the state violence that is inflicted on Black and brown communities. So when we talk about gun control, we can't exclude these conversations on gun control in these communities as well. So it's really interesting, and I'm so glad that she agreed to help me out with this. So stay tuned, and we'll hear from her after the break.
Thanks for that introduction. I really think it's great that you're having this podcast to talk about hip hop in ways that a lot of people aren't talking about it. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I think the first thing, when you talked about hip hop heads not valuing or wanting to associate hip hop with drill music, I think what that does is it reflects a brand of elitism that has kind of come into hip hop culture. My master's thesis was actually about the distinction, or what people understand, in terms of the term hip hop head. And my thesis actually differentiated between snobs and heads, right? So when we talk about hip hop heads, we're talking about people who study and understand the history of the culture. I always remind people that before, the MCs really started being complicated and complex with their rhymes, they were just the people who kept the party moving so the DJs and the breakers could do their thing. So when people critique hip hop in the context of dance music, it shows me that they forgot the history of hip hop being party and dance music. For me, as somebody who's part of hip hop culture, a practitioner, a lifelong member of this culture, I understand that I'm not going to necessarily like all of the music, but that doesn't mean that just because I don't like it, that it's no longer part of hip hop culture because it doesn't fit my taste preferences. It's just like a family, right? You have people in your family, your blood family, that you may not like, But just because that you don't like them, that doesn't make them not family. There are certain things about hip hop that I particularly like. And all of the hip hop music doesn't reflect my taste. But I'm not going to say it's not hip hop just because I don't like it. I also think that there's two things. There's a very revisionist history of this time we call the golden era. This presumption that there was ever a time when all hip hop music was positive and it was so diverse and everybody was dope. That never happened. What happens is, as history progresses, there's only certain narratives that get told. You know, the MCs and the DJs that were whack, they don't hold a place in history over time. But the difference between now and then is when hip hop culture was in control of its narrative. It was shaped differently than now that hip hop is being used. It's being pawned around by outside forces to make points or to reflect certain images or tell certain narratives about society. The narrative of hip hop itself, because it's no longer fully in the hands of the people, is getting skewed. And the thing that disappoints me is us that claim to know and love and care about hip hop culture are falling for the foolishness and starting to see our culture the way it's presented to us from people outside the culture. Right. So I was born in the 80s. I've been listening and loving and rhyming and being a part of hip hop culture since the 90s. There's always been violent music. There's always been hyper violent music, but it's never been dismissed. Right. And these recent claims that it is the violence in the music that's causing the violence in the cities is just not true. Right. From a sociological perspective, when you align the music and the violence, it doesn't align. Right. So people can point to the increase of crime in Chicago and connect it to the increase of popularity of drill music. But drill music is not the reason for crime in Chicago. Just like crime in Oakland is not caused by hyphy music. I think that's something that for me, it hurts me to see people who claim to love and understand the culture that buy into those narratives. Because we forget or we don't know. And again, not knowing about your own culture should limit the extent to which you speak on it. But we forget to acknowledge that since the 90s, since NWA, the primary consumers of rap music have been white men, right? So if white men are the primary consumers, then the violence that is supposed to come from that music is supposed to be white men. So if you want to look at the connection between rap music and violence, perhaps you should look at the playlist of these mass shooters, right? Because by and large, it's white men that are consuming hip hop music. They're not a part of hip hop culture. But one, you got to acknowledge that in this country, since its inception, white men have loved violence, right? They love violence. And then the second thing is that they love to be entertained by specific performances of Black culture at a distance, right? They love it brought to them live, but in a way where it can't necessarily impact them. So when you go to these shows, you go to a drill show or you look at a footage or a photo of a drill show, and you'll see a sea of white faces. You'll see a few Black faces, but no pun intended. You'll see a few Black people, and these tickets to these shows are $50, $100, $150, $200. The Black kids in these impoverished neighborhoods are not the ones that can pay the money to go to these concerts. So the idea that the drill music is increasing the violence in Chicago, you know, sociologically, if you look past the media narratives, you'll see that argument falls flat very quickly. One of the things I love when I look at drill artists is looking at the reality that they understand that there's a market for this performance, that the role that they're playing is something that someone's going to pay money for. You know, the people living that life that drill rappers rap about, they don't get to make money doing it, you know, and the rappers that have tried to straddle that fence, unfortunately, there's been maybe 10 or so drill artists who have fallen, victim to gun violence, because there's a difference between rapping about an environment and actually partaking in what goes on in that environment. If you're quote unquote reporting live from the scene, then you have to take yourself out of the scene to report it. You can't be in it and report it at the same time. And I say that because the shelf life for that is very short. You see artists like King Louis, who's been shot 7 or 8 times, one time in the head. Or you look at Fredo Santana, who passed earlier this year because of organ failure from his addiction to lean. That at the time of his passing, he was actually he was clean. He was trying to stop, but the damage had been so far gone that his organs weren't able to recover. But I say this because the artists who are making this music are smart enough to understand that there's a market for it that can help improve the lives of them and their families, right? That's a smart thing to do. It doesn't, we have to understand that it doesn't cause violence. We have to understand that these are young people who are looking at the opportunities in their surroundings and taking the best one, right? This is why there's so many drill artists now. Because you see someone from your neighborhood, from your area, living in the same environment that you're living, suddenly being able to move his family out of this environment to Los Angeles in a gated community. And that's your Chief Keef, right? So I would say that drill music hasn't made more violence as much as it has made more drill artists. What happens, unfortunately, is that the visibility and money and popularity that comes from profiting from this narrative makes the artist a target. So you're more likely to be targeted now as a famous artist than you were as somebody, just living in the community with all the violence you talk about. It's kind of how like Tupac was saying that he never really got in trouble until he became famous. Right? But it's the visibility of living that lifestyle. It's the jealousy of people around you who see you taking advantage of an opportunity to do something different that is causing the retaliatory violence. But it's not raising the violence in terms of drill culture, because people can listen to violent music and not do violent things. And you can be a killer who listens to jazz, right? There's no direct correlation between people's violence and the music they listen to. I don't like how when people look at Black people, specifically Black youth, and the ways they go about making money legally or illegally, and try to take it out of the frame of the capitalist system that we're operating in that values the dollar over everything else, right? It takes me back to understanding that society is being reflected through hip hop. Now, people always want to assume that when I'm talking about drill music reflecting the violent tendencies of Chicago youth. But no, drill music is reflecting the responses of limited life chances and life choices that these young folks are forced to make because society refuses to nurture them. I can't tell a smart kid in Chicago to go to school when the privatization of schools, school closings in Black neighborhoods, is making it difficult to actually succeed through school. I was reading something recently about how they're closing some middle schools in Inglewood, right, on the south side. They're closing some middle schools to make way for a new high school to be built. But the way they're closing the middle schools, they're closing them during the school year. So none of those students get to graduate. So when the new high school is built, they're not going to be eligible to enroll in that school. So what happens to these thousands of children who you've told, go to school, get an education, that's your opportunity to make it, and they have no school to go to? So I'm not going to tell a kid to go to school when there's somebody from their neighborhood who didn't go to school, who can rap about some stuff that some of it may be true, some of it may be made up in their imagination. But regardless, people are paying them $5,000, $10,000, $25,000 to rap about it for 30 minutes. That's a no-brainer. And what I won't do is blame structural problems on youth who are the most severely victimized by the greed that causes these social problems for the way they cope, absent any paths to success or any paths to healing. people call drill music nihilistic, right? But the music has more, it has values. It's kill or be killed. It's protect yourself at all times. It's trust nobody who hasn't proven themselves. It's show no mercy to the enemy. You know, as a youth worker, I have to know what my youth are listening to because that's reflecting how they feel. I remember when I was a youth listening to Mary J. Blige and Tupac and Da Brat and Lil' Kim, Lauryn Hill, Common, Scarface. All these MCs were reflecting the things that I was feeling inside and projecting them into the airwaves, right? So people hopefully could understand what I was going through. I can't cut off the music that my young people are listening to because it's reflecting their reality. It's reflecting how they're feeling. And a friend and I, we kind of talk about it in the context of tribal war music. You know, the beats, they're really tapped in to get you moving. You know, you can work out to drill music and you'll have the best workout of your life. It may not be the best music to listen to while you're washing dishes. But if you want to get hype about washing dishes, you might put it on. Because again, we have to understand the music in context. Interviews of a lot of these drill artists, you'll hear that they're articulate beyond what they say on their songs, right? And if you've ever tried to write certain types of music, it's an art, it's a skill to make it sound so simplistic, to make it so catchy, right? We hear it and the result sounds simplistic, so we assume that the process is simplistic. But you can tell the difference between a good drill rapper and one that's not good. And I think when people do that, they can appreciate a little bit more the artistry of it. But again, it's not nihilistic, right? It has its value system, and it's not about not caring about life. The city of Chicago, if you look at the mayor, if you look at Mayor Rahm Emanuel, he's corrupt. So the city operates understanding that the social structures put in place are corrupt. So there's no rules. You know, we forget that Chicago's a gangster city, and people say, oh yeah, gangsters like the BDs and the GDs and the Latin Kings. No, gangster like Al Capone, right? Gangster before the Great Migration and urban communities. You know, it has that history, and it comes from the fact that the social structures are corrupt. So again, when you have people living in these conditions, especially young people, and making these choices, I'm not going to blame them for the choices they make, for the situations and circumstances they find themselves in. If I want to do something about the narratives in the music, I have to change the conditions of the young people who are making the music. For me, especially in the context of young black men, hip hop exposed me to the depression and the hopelessness and the helplessness that young black men feel. You know, we portray them as these animals that have no feelings, no complex emotions, no compassion. But if you listen to hip hop music, you hear the pain. You hear the pain coming out, whether it's internalized or whether it's projected on the ones that, you know, they choose to victimize after being victimized so much themselves. So we can't disregard it just because we don't like it, just because we don't like what we hear. We have to acknowledge that there's something valuable in this music because, one, it's showing us the brilliant potential of young people who are able to seize opportunities when they're provided to them, right? In addition to the closing of schools, there's very little art programs, right? There's very little sports programs even. All these studies that come out that talk about, you know, black kids in Chicago experience as much PTSD as kids in Iraq. Now, I always critique the idea of PTSD because there's nothing post about consistent trauma that's environmental, right? So the claim has fallacies in it, but they continue to throw these statistics, but they don't pour more resources or do anything to change the conditions. So you say, oh, you know, kids in these neighborhoods are living in these terrible conditions. And then you blame them for the conditions they're in instead of saying, wow, maybe we need to restructure our youth services or the funding we provide for mental health to youth living in these areas. But that's never what happens, you know. So thinking about it, Malcolm X called it the hate that hate produced. The idea that responses of black people to be violent or to be quote unquote hateful are a response or a reaction to the violence and hate inflicted upon them. The reality that if you plant seeds of hopelessness, of violence, of hate, of devaluation into young people, they're going to grow and become violent. They're going to grow and reflect what they've been taught by society. You know, the thing that gets me is after 50 years, 60 years of being told this, not only through hip hop music, but through Black scholars, that we still ignore that, you know, the music, specifically drill music, is a reflection of larger social structural conditions that we need to address. It pains me that in hip hop, we've decided to dismiss or disregard these young people, especially since they're young, right? I've seen Lil Durk, Chief Keef, Lil Bibby. I've seen them grow. Fredo Santana before he passed, R.I.P. I've seen these artists grow in terms of their maturity, in terms of the way they're looking at life, in terms of the things they value and the compassion they're openly showing. Imagine we threw away everything that people did between 13 and 18. You know, that's what our justice system does. That's what our education system does. But hip hop's not supposed to do that. Hip hop's supposed to be the thing that allows you to be yourself, speak your truth, grow. Unfortunately, and this goes back to the idea of quote unquote hip hop heads rejecting drill music. This elitism is it's detrimental to our culture because it causes a rift. You know, when I see young people, I always see the potential of them. You know, I don't see the criminal narrative that society is cast upon them, because I remember when I was young and it was cast upon me. And here I am, right? A PhD. And hip hop is supposed to be that thing that you can grab onto until you find, you know, that helps you find your way. But now, you know, we're trying to distance ourselves because we don't like what we hear. But we can't ignore it, right? We can't ignore the voice of the youth because, again, they're reaching out, trying to find something to hold on to. So do I like all drill music? No, but I don't like all hip hop. But I definitely respect the artistry that comes from it. And I acknowledge that it's reflecting social structural conditions that we need to address. I don't hate drill artists. I don't think they're stupid. I don't think they're any more violent than any other youth in our country, right? Recently, there's been all this talk about making schools safe. And the gun violence conversations are very different in communities of culture where gun violence is something that's not going to be addressed by changes in gun laws. Because a lot of people committing gun crimes in these neighborhoods, they don't have legal guns anyway. But if you want to attack illegal guns, then you end up drawing a line back to the government, right? Who's already been implicated in the sale of illegal guns. So we don't actually want to have those conversations because it's easier to blame young Black and brown, right, kids for causing the violence, you know. But in other communities, the safety issue is not made the responsibility of the kids, right? But drill music has been the newest thing to divert attention from the real problems and scapegoat, once again, young Black folks for being the reason why there's violence.
Wow, that was an amazing and comprehensive explanation of drill history and the significance of drill. I hope that it at least planted a seed in some of y'all's minds on why we should consider drill music an important component of hip hop and we shouldn't dismiss it so quickly. So unfortunately, that's all the time that we have tonight, but thank you for tuning in to our second episode. Once again, I'm Andrea Baldrias, and this is Hip Hop Is.